Evening, people.
How's it going?
I thought that was appropriate. And thank you for being on the show, Volko. Thank you, David. This was almost a last-minute thing. I'm glad you guys said yay, because I was thinking about that question. Whatever happened to war games? This is a question I guess, posed myself. And it went deeper than that. What do you mean, whatever happened to war games? It's like, who screwed up war games in the Grognar sense? And I said, Christ, I know these guys. And well, Volko, you're a main culprit. You're a main culprit. And David, since I'm gonna say, since you're younger, and you it's as if you took that lead and you really messed it up even more. It's now I'm gonna show you a little clip of what's happening in the life of a family that plays war games, okay? And because I thought about this, and because of you guys, this is what's happening. So here we go, and I'm gonna try to make this quick. Bam. Hold on here. And yeah. This is going to be pretty interesting. So basically, you guys are coming in the life of a family. This is a regular family. This is what it is. All right? Here we go. Hold on.
Hey, Nappy, let's play a war game. Sure, Paul. Okay, let's play this one here. I want a war game. Okay, Paul, I got a good one here. This one right here. It's brand new almost. Hey, what's the matter with you? Don't you understand? I want to play a game. What's next? You're gonna make me play one of these games? Huh? Well, how about this one, Paul? It doesn't even have a map. Maybe it's gonna win for best map at the CSR Awards. Okay, Nebby, I gotta explain something. This is the war game. It's got hex and counters. I go, you go. Okay. Maybe Opportunity Fire mixes things up, but hey, that's what it is. These guys understood. Huh? These guys understood. Huh? And these guys fully understood because it's old school. Old school. I go, you go. What about this one? This is a good one that's got hexes and counters.
Yeah. And yes, I am exaggerating, but I'm sure that's what's happening, man, to some old granddad. When I say old granddad, I'm generalizing here. So you guys are sincerely, and you have to admit it, main culprits in changing the way war games go. Am I right or not? Silence speaks volumes, man.
Volko's way more responsible for the destruction of war games than I am. I'm just coming into the end. What's the ashes?
Yeah. Hold on a second. Yes, Volko, you are like hopefully somebody else that's going to come on here, but I don't want to mention his name because if he doesn't come on, I'm going to have to scream. You actually created a system. Like, you even went deeper. You went to the mechanics of the thing. You ripped out its guts and you put in Volko. So now a lot of these games run on Volko Steam. And that's the coin game or the coin system. So you've changed quite a bit the way we think about war games, because there's no line of sight in your games.
Yeah,
there's no line of sight.
Here's my defense. I'm a history major, like you guys. I enjoy history. We play games about history, and if you study history, you have to realize that there are all kinds of trends. There are currents and eddies of history. And if you say, well, who wrecked the Roman Empire? Who's the guy who wrecked the Roman Empire, right? Well, it was a process. that was that had to do with the nature of the empire and the rest of the world and civilization and what was happening in the barbarians outside trying to get in. And it was a sweep of history, and you can apply the same things to cultural history like war games. That is to say, I may be participating in a tendency, but to point to this or that individual is, I think, deeply unfair.
That's very well said, very eloquent, and and a little bit of bunch of crock. Volko, you're a main instrument in the evolution, if I can say that, the evolution of war games, because you've taken, I think you've taken what you know best, put it into a game system, and it has become this new thing called coin. We didn't have counterinsurgency before, not the way you did it, because maybe because when I was playing with Mark and the farmer aids, I mean the player's aid, I had a little tipple and I didn't understand what game I was playing, but I didn't understand. I was still stuck in my old ways of like, well, I go, you go. Well, that's my turn now. But no, he flashes a card and it's still his turn. And this is what's happening. He's taking over the town. He's got the politics happening. My guerrillas are, it's nothing.
But you know that with the coin series, there was insurgency. I mean, you said we didn't do insurgency. We did do insurgency in, like you say, different ways, right? So before that was Brian Train. He had a whole suite of games.
He's Canadian.
Topic. And he is Canadian. Yeah, he's a great designer. So
it doesn't matter.
So what? He doesn't count because he's Canadian? Yes,
he's
Canadian.
Cute. He's cute.
Yeah.
He's sorry.
Okay. So I took a piece of Brian Train, and I took a piece of Mark Herman and Mark Simonich, who were influential in bringing in cards into games about war. Okay. And I took a little bit of Joe Miranda too, Battle of Baghdad, in terms of asymmetrical victory conditions. And I put that together in a new way to tell a different story, which was about Colombia, and thought I could make it a series. So,
well,
that's a flow, that's a river, I didn't.
But a river has to start.
I didn't turn the river, I just jumped in.
Volko, please, you didn't turn the river, eh? My God, the river went back onto itself. It went upstream now. The river, you know what I'm saying? And that's very well said, Volko. You, in the court of law, I would lose because you're better spoken than I am. But in the streets, it's another story. David, now your influence, because you do play Hex and Counter war games, right? Like everybody else, the ogre and all that, whatever, Yep. So what made you decide to go over the pond in Europe and steal?
Well, okay. So let me ask you this before I answer that. So let's say that you wanted to design a game. Let's say you wanted to design Cuba Libre, but you wanted to do it in such a way that was a Hex and Counter game. Like, how would you do that? What does that look like? A conventional war game that adheres to whatever that means, right? Hex and Counter.
So you're asking me as a non-designer, how would I do that?
How would you do that? Because I guess my question to Volko would not be, have you blown up war games or whatever, but when you made the decision, hey, I'm going to design Cuba Libre, would it have even been possible to design it in such a way that adheres to what people would generally broadly call, traditional Hex and Counter type war games?
Well, it would be something very different, wouldn't it? And I mean, I also reached back to Nick Karp, Victory Games Vietnam, which is a very intense Hex and Counter traditional war game. And it was not necessarily traditional at the time because of the kind of conflict it was covering, but its tools are very traditional for 1984 when it was done. And it's all tools. It's just right. It's
right.
Do I want a hex grid on my map? Well, how important is time and distance and specific terrain? If it's really important, and I'm designing the game in 2020, then I'm probably going to do it on a hex map. But if
Yeah.
that's not so important because we're doing national level, political military insurgency, why would I reach for that tool?
Yeah.
I
Yep.
mean, I want to drive a nail into a board. Why would I reach for a saw?
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
No, it's a good point. And I mean, my first ever, so Undaunted, you could call it a hex and counter game because it uses offset squares, which are essentially hexes, and its counters moving around it. But if you just ignore that for a second, I just designed my first ever hex and counter game, and it was by Stealth and Sea, and I did it because exactly what Volko was talking about. I looked across all the spectrum of, what tools can I use for this extremely tactical, where maneuver is extremely important, time is very important. I wanted to be able to track those things in detail, and I looked. And I did for quite a while. Like, what are all of my options available to me? And I eventually settled on hexes and counters. But okay. So to answer your question, Dan. So I am really the funny thing is, let's go back to the intro credits where you call me David the Kid Thompson. I think wargaming is the only thing in the world I could ever be called the kid in. But but I came to wargaming pretty late, right? Like, I mean, pretty recently. So. When I came to wargaming, I came to it at the same time I did to board gaming in general. And so I encountered a lot of things simultaneously. And so the first war game I ever played was A Few Acres of Snow. So, it's still one of my favorite games, and certainly it probably still is the most influential game as far as like my design sensibilities. So I think it just traces back to where I came from, right? Encountering those things simultaneously.
So basically, when you're designing a war game, or when you were designing a war game, necessity is the mother of invention. Is that right?
Sure.
Yeah. Why would I go with a system that's less optimized for what I'm trying to evoke? When I'm never going to say, oh, I'll make this a hex and counter game just for the sake of doing it, right?
And that's a part of this. That's the trends or the river that I was talking about, or a part of it is what is the state of the art? What technologies do we have available, right? How big is the toolbox? You go back to, I think, games in the 1970s, like Plot to Assassinate Hitler, I think, is on a hex map.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Why?
Yeah.
Why? Because that's what was done. It was tradition. It was what's available. It's a limited toolbox. It's something the players understand. The designers understand, the graphic artists understand, and you reach for it. Okay, but that's the 1970s. Why go back with 50-year-old technology, right? Right, if the state of the art advances. So for me, a big, epiphany, like wake up moment, because I played all those games, hex and counter, absolutely. Not everything was hexes, there was upfront, but basically, I didn't really take it seriously if it didn't have a hex map. Until I played Mark Simonich's Hannibal, Rome versus Carthage, and I bought it on a lark. I'm like, oh, this, maybe I'll do this with my kids, right? Because it looked goofy to me as an old-time war gamer. And I played it, and I'm like, this is a fantastic simulation of the Second Punic War. and it's easy to play, and it's a lot of fun. And there's a lot of cool stuff going on here that isn't even going on in most war games I know. And that just, was like, okay, so now, if I'm going to design after that, have that experience, and I'm like, well, would events? Could I bring in political events into a military simulation with cards in a handy, cool, fun way? Can I get away with point to point because it's just easier to deal with than a terrain effects chart and a hex map? Maybe then I will, right? It's the expansion of the toolbox that has been going on in the art form, in the hobby for decades, that means we can have traditional things that are like what was in the 1970s, only better, or we can have really different things because we can apply through invention to meet necessity. We can apply this greater toolkit. That's where we are today, and it's fantastic.
Oh my God! You said so many things, Volko, that you would have been blasted by these old grognards. Oh my God!
What are you talking about?
So you guys know Ardwolf?
How's it going?
What's up, buddy?
Hi.
Good to see you.
So I brought Ardwolf here because I'm hoping that he's going to understand what I'm trying to say and vocalize it better because he likes words. I'm Italian. I like hands.
I'm
But
Italian too, Dan.
Oh,
Don't
sorry,
forget
Dan.
that. Don't forget that.
Sorry.
I'm just saying.
Okay, Volko. Now you've explained that to me. I understand 100%. So in this day and age, a designer like Bruno Sinigalio, and I don't mean to belittle this and that. He came out with a game that's a monster game right now called A Time for Trumpets. Like 1,000 maps, 1 billion counters, and you need your own ranch to put out the maps to play the game.
In fairness, Bruno has been working on that game for many years.
Yeah, okay, I'm thank you, Ardwolf, and I'm glad you're there. Grazie. Now, is there still place for a game like that? Yes, there is. I know there is, but I'm asking you guys. And how do you explain your philosophy, Volko, to a guy like Bruno Sinigalio, who is probably a very hardcore grognard hex encounter kid, get the hell out of my way type thing? I'm playing a war game person. Are you going to say the same things to him that you would have said right now to me, and expect the grognard to understand that you wait, that you a young, good-looking guy, probably in his eyes is probably you're probably like a snot-nosed kid. Kid, get out of here! What do you know about war games? That kind of person. What do you do?
No, I've played with Bruno in the old WBCs and with his son also. I don't think I'd have to explain that to him. I'd be stunned if he didn't already understand that because of how well he knows the evolution of the hobby. Yeah,
I just used his name just like that. I mean, because I've been once to WBC. Unfortunately, you guys weren't there, and I went upstairs to the quiet room where shh, don't make a sound. And I remember asking a guy, "Can I take a picture?" And he says, "Of what?" What do you mean, of what? I want to take a picture of the goings on here. This guy was totally spaced out. I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but you know what I'm trying to say? It's like these, even on BGG, there was a thread not long ago talking about what a war game is, this and this and that. And David Thompson's name came up, and it was like, that's not a war game. This is not a war game, but it is. It is a war game because you guys made it such that it is a war game. Twilight Struggle. Is Twilight Struggle a war game?
Yeah. So,
yeah.
A little bit ago, you said, is there still a room for a game like a Time for Trumpets? Absolutely, of course. And I have this year had the chance because I have a great online group and through other venues like SD Hiscon, I've done a lot of gaming this year online, and I've gotten to play more games actually under lockdown than ever before, and that includes lots of what I think you would say are pretty traditional war games, intense hex encounter simulations. The Burning Blue, for example, by Lee Brimcombe Wood.
Yes, I'm sending you an invoice for that because I bought it after seeing your post.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, and it is a fantastic, detailed, authentic, convincing, compelling model of raid scale operations in the Battle of Britain, with hexes and little counters and the whole thing, and it's wonderful, and I would never give that up. I wouldn't want to only be allowed to play that, I wouldn't want to have to declare, well, you're a war gamer, and so this is what you can play and what you can't play. So I would come back at what difference, to explain to us what difference it makes, what is or isn't a war game. I mean, I listened to the interesting broadcast Armchair Dragoons, Grant Galeri, and they just had one about, bouncing off the Charlie Awards and, what is a war game? And they spent 90 minutes talking about it. But where they ended up was, yeah, but if this isn't a war game, we still like it. We're not saying it's bad. It's not a value judgment. And then they ended up with, well, if it's a good game, we want to play it. And if it's not a good game, we don't want to play it. So if that's the case, what, and by the way, not a rhetorical question. I have my own answer. I think it does matter in a way to talk about what do you guys think? What difference does it make whether it's a war game or not?
This is a question that, I mean, we struggle with. I mean, I struggle with myself about this question. Do I consider U-Boat to be a war game? And for me, the answer is no, but who cares? That's my personal definition.
Yeah.
My taste in these kinds of historical simulation games that we do make me a complete troglodyte. I am 100% comfortable with that. I like old school hex and counter stuff. But that doesn't mean, nor is it reasonable for me to expect, that the field as a whole is not going to move on from that and evolve over time. And you know, I'm one of the people on that Armchair Dragoons, Charlie's 2 hours of nonstop complaining about U-Boat. Really, I was surprised it ate up as little of the broadcast as it did. But it's something we struggle with, right? We struggle as a community to answer that question about what is a war game.
But I think you just put your finger on exactly what to me is really all that matters. And that is, we want to be able to characterize whether something is or isn't a war game according to us, because we consider ourselves somebody who likes war games or doesn't like war games. And so as we talk about, all right, well, this example, what about this? What about U-Boat? What about Twilight Struggle? You know, what about Fire and Lake, or whatever it's going to be? What we're really talking about is either from the perspective of, I'm an old school war gamer, or I like war games, or I like war games, but I straddle, or I don't like war games. I don't like war games. And that group is out there too. And now I'm going to use that conversation with you about whether or not this particular thing is a war game to help you understand what I like and don't like, and so that I can better understand what you like and don't like. And that's it.
Now, Volko and David, would we be having this conversation if you, Dave, Volko, David, and Mark Herman were never born?
Yes.
Oh yeah, for
Yes.
sure.
We would absolutely be having this exact same conversation.
Say that again?
We would absolutely be still having this exact same conversation. And in fact, you just saw 4 other people, and more than 4, on BGG having this exact same conversation.
Yeah, but
and over and over and over and over again in an incredibly tiresome chain of events.
Yeah, but Artie, if Volko was not around, if David Thompson was not around, if my God, what's that guy's name? Lincoln. He did Lincoln.
Martin Wallace.
Martin Wallace, yeah.
If Martin Wallace wasn't around and Mark Herman wasn't around, well, there would not have been a CBG game.
Maybe not, but we would still have seen some designer would come to fill the void. Some group of designers would come to fill the void in the alternate universe in which there's no Volko or David.
I mean, you'd have to eliminate up front, wouldn't you?
Sure. And in fact, you got to get rid of Jim Dunnigan too, right? I mean, look at this, right? I just happen to have this handy. So designers have been tackling, to various degrees of success, non-traditional wargame topics forever. And it's only really, I think, in the last few years that, and by the last few years, I guess I mean about the last 20 years, where we've really seen mechanical ideas brought in from other parts of gaming that have helped those non-traditional mechanics, those non-traditional topics get treated in a reasonable way, a way that's fun and simulative and all that. It's just evolution. If it didn't evolve in the way that it has evolved, it would have evolved in a different way. We would still be having the same crusty old dudes with gray beards arguing, it doesn't have hexes or counters, it's not a war game. We would still have those same guys arguing with different people about how their designs are not war games. And I'm one of those guys. So,
well, are you guys ever going to go away?
You want us to go away?
No. I'm talking about Ardwolf. Ardwolf, hold on. You grognards, when I say you grognards, are you ever going to accept that it is a war game, that Twilight Struggle, and I'm going to say it, that Twilight Struggle and U-Boat are war games?
But do they need to? I mean, so first of all, if there's a group of people that don't think that Twilight Struggle is a war game, or Coin Games are war games, or Undaunted is a war game, like, that's fine. It doesn't bother me, right? Like, it doesn't. Let them enjoy their games that they want to play. right? I mean, it doesn't bother me at all.
Does it make any difference to you, Dan? What is or isn't a war game?
Well, yeah.
Now we're talking
Hold
like
on.
grown-ups.
I'm trying, because Volko, you're one of those guys that you go right to the heart. I want a show. I wanted a show, so I came up with something. So we have a show to discuss. Other than that, does it matter to me? No, it doesn't matter to me. But I just want to know why it matters. Why it matters to a guy like Gary Ardwolf that he's a hex and counter guy, and U-Boat is not a war game.
But that doesn't mean I don't enjoy Twilight Struggle or Fire in the Lake or whatever, right? I mean, I like those games too. It's just that my comfort zone is in Hex and Counter, and there is an effort involved. If I don't know if effort is the right word, but there's a step I have to make outside that comfort zone to step into something like a coin game, which I have a ton of and have played quite a bit of.
And for that reason, it's helpful to have terminology and categorization, because you can say, well, I tend to like traditional war games, right? And that then helps somebody say, okay, well then let's play this or whatever. Or it helps you form a group or narrow down what you might play with somebody, perhaps, right? And it's good for those definitions to have some common understanding. So it does actually ultimately come back to personal, this is the key, personal value judgments. We tend to use those terms and to care about them because we either tend to like or tend not to like the thing. And that's it. And so if we all say, well, we tend to like traditional war games, if there's a borderline case, okay, well, how far does your comfort zone stretch? Might be a useful conversation.
Well, it's
but
not
probably to say
binary choice.
falls on this side or that side of a line doesn't sound like a very useful conversation, as opposed to, yeah, I like that game or I don't like that game.
Well, how far does your comfort zone stretch, as opposed to what? Squad leader and the Fire in the Lake?
Well, here, think of it in this context. What is up front more of a war game than Twilight Struggle is? Okay. There's no binary, this is a war game and this is not. I mean, there's some things that clearly aren't because they're so far away from the field. And there's some things that are almost always agreed that they are war games. But where you draw that line is up to every individual person. I'm going to take the completely indefensible position that Twilight Struggle is a war game, but U-Boat is not. Why? Again, that's just where I feel it lands. I think when you're playing, I liked actually Marco Renardo's definition of a war game. I thought it was very useful. He defines a war game as a game that when he plays it, he feels like he's playing a war game.
Very good.
and that's completely fine. I feel like I'm playing a war game if I'm playing Twilight Struggle, just like I'm playing OCS.
This is the point I'm trying to make, is the answer to the question is deeply personal.
Yes.
Yeah,
Somebody
for me,
else will come up with completely different answers when asked these same questions.
Yeah, for me, the one thing that I care about, and this is kind of to Volko's point about, it's really about the individual's expectations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, when I'm playing more generally a historical game, right? But by extension, in many cases, a war game, I want there to be historical basis and context included with the game. And so if I buy a game about a battle that I don't know about because I want to learn about the battle through the game, I want to be able to learn. I want the context to be included in that. And I'm really disappointed when I can't, right? So there's been times where I got a game like about a Battle of Mortain, for example, and it's like, oh, just put the counters wherever you want on the west side of, whatever. And I'm like, no, that's not what I want. I got it because I want to know where the order of battle is. And so, I mean, but each person's expectations are different, right?
Well, I mean, the expectations of a grognard are when a new war game comes out, what subject is it going to be, and how far are the hexes? I mean, what am I trying to say?
Scale,
huh?
yeah.
The hex scale.
Yeah, what's the hex scale? That's the expectation of a grognard. That's what you expect, and then you got like Cuba Libre that comes out, and it's like Cuba Libre. Wow, okay, a Bay of Pigs and all that stuff, and yay, it's going to be a war game. You open it up and you got cards. So the old grognards go, what the hell? If there's no hex encounter, and I'm playing devil's advocate here. There's no. It's not a traditional war game. So you know what I'm trying to say.
SPI was doing area movement map war games that are indisputably war games in the mid 70s. There's a game I want to say it's called 1812. It's about the whole Napoleon's entire Russian campaign that literally ships with two versions of the game. You flip the map over, and on one side it's hexes, and the other side it's areas.
Yes, see,
Gilbert Collins did a video on this. It's actually awesome, and it's one of those weird little, SPI things. It's like, wow, this is a brilliant illustration of the point. If that's where you're gonna draw your personal line, it's got to have hexes. And what about this thing? You could play this one either way.
Who designed that?
Not sure. Wouldn't be surprised if it was a Jim Dunnigan design.
It's funny because I think he was thinking way ahead, man, way ahead to some guys like Volko and David. They're going to be born one day, and they're going to take that and they're going to run with it. And that's what happened. Now, my head's all over the place, okay, guys, because I'm doing all this stuff. There's who is this guy? HB. It's
no clue.
I have no idea.
This was not a Dunnigan design. This was Phil Orbanes Sr. and John Young.
Well, Dunnigan did Empires of the Middle Ages in 1980, which is essentially point to point. Very and more political, really, than anything else. And we played it to death. Even pulled it out recently and played it again. It's brilliant.
Should I block this guy? I mean,
that is up to you.
Oh man.
Yeah. Well, I have a guess who HB is, but I'm,
I don't know. But he's being a real problem. I'm going to have.
Are you wearing a Michigan shirt, Dan?
Shit. No. No.
You should have thought. You should have thought of that.
Let me see here. I've got some questions I wrote down in a drunken stupor a few days ago. Okay, so look, coin system, David Thompson system. You guys, it is going against the grain. Do you agree?
The only thing I would say,
question.
Yes.
But maybe, but here's the question. When you say it that way, someone could infer like going against the grain for the point of going against the grain. And that's certainly not the intent, right? I certainly never sit down and say, I'm going to go against the grain. What can I do? Okay.
No, that's good. That's good. But not taking your answer because your answer just threw away my thunder. When you sand wood, you go with the grain. When you cut meat, you go against the grain. And Volko's a vegetarian, first of all. So he doesn't even know that.
I'm a former butcher. So.
That's funny. In my head, that was very funny.
I'm not even making it up either.
Okay. So here's my next thing. Now, military schools, when they do war games, I'm assuming, Volko, correct me if I'm wrong, or David, it's hex encounter, right?
Rarely.
Yeah, I can tell you, I've never done a hex encounter with like a planning, like an actual military planning.
For real.
So we can. I am not the right guy to answer this question, right? But some of the Armchair Dragoons guys that do the convention events with them are people who actually run war games for places like the U.S. Army War College, and the stuff that they have done at Origins has been not hex based. And but at the same time, I've seen pictures of Marines officers playing a hex based thing. So
basically, it works off intelligence. That's all I can think that you got going. That's it.
Yeah, it's some of those things. Yes, that's exactly how it works. It's a you're moving pieces around on a map. You have a map. and little wooden pieces. This is like the classic von Reiswitz Kriegspiel
Right.
that Armchair Dragoons does at Origins, for example, and which is a big hit among non-war gamers because people walk by and it looks interesting, and everybody's got these like study carols to provide fog of war. Nobody knows anything except about what the guy that came over to your little cubicle tells you.
Right.
But there's different exercises that they do, some of which are adaptations of actual army military exercises.
You know, and the reason is because the tradition in professional wargaming is adjudication, right? That there are seminar style things called war games that are strategic conversations, where there's no map or physical representation of anything. It's basically role play and diplomacy going on. There's certainly computer assisted games and simulations. The most typically, you have a white cell, you have judges that are going to resolve events so the play can be more open, so that when you design the game, you don't have to know or constrain everything that might happen and devise a closed rule set that has to adjudicate everything without the creator in the room. The creators can be in the room, and then you're leveraging through that role play I mentioned, you're leveraging the expertise, because the players very often, if it's for research, they're VIPs, they're generals and admirals and the like, right? Who you're trying to give them the latitude to do what they would do in real life. If you adjudicate in that way, it's like an RPG, right? You don't actually need necessarily to even measure, because you have a judge there says, okay, now your unit is here, or whatever that it is. So with humans in the loop adjudicating in the room, because you have that luxury in a professional war game, you don't necessarily need all of the definition to resolve everything like a CRT gives you, or a terrain effects chart, or a hex grid does. If it's a commercial game, it goes in a box. Traditionally, it goes out to people, they pull out the rules, and they have to be able to operate that system, play that game without the designer being there adjudicating. It's got to cover everything. That's what I mean by closed rule set. Now you really have to, if movement of units matters, you really have to regulate it in some way. So you need a chessboard, a hex map, or something like that.
No, but I mean, were you guys, because you guys are in the business, you think you've influenced how war games are taught?
Professional war games.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about like when the serious war gamers get down to practice war games. Do you think that you guys were a big influence because of your techniques or the way you approach war games? No.
Well, commercial war games in general are an influence. And so when I said rarely, hex is, the main exceptions are when instructors or researchers, but more likely instructors in professional wargaming, borrow something that's commercial and adapt it to their training program or their research and analysis or whatever. And that happens, I think it's been happening more and more. I don't know for sure, but my sense is over the last 20 years, that has happened more. There's been more cross-pollination between commercial war games and professional wargaming. And in that way, designs like ours do have an influence because of that cross-pollination. So if you, just like you've got, through the internet and BGG and things like that, and things like this, more cross-pollination over the last 3 decades between Euro games, family board games, that kind of thing, and old style wargaming, right? That's what we've been talking about. That's one of the trends, is that cross-fertilization, right? That fusion, if you will. Same thing has been going on, I contend, between commercial wargaming and professional wargaming, that allows, so that if you're, you want to teach something about insurgency in Afghanistan and a distant plane is already there available on the shelf, right? It's relatively cheap for a training program to buy that, maybe adapt it, simplify it, or make it more complicated, whatever the learning objectives are, and use it in the classroom. And that has definitely happened. And it's happened with the Coin Series, and it's happened with a lot of other commercial games.
Who influences more, the designers or the war gamers? Where does the influence come from most? Like, are we taking more from them, or are you guys giving more to them in terms of mechanics and material and ideas?
I don't.
Yeah, do you have a view, David?
Well, so my interaction with professional wargaming is pretty limited, right? It was primarily when I was in in UCOM, right, in the UK, working with planners there. And I will just say, from my experience, it was more one-sided, right? More professional borrowing from the commercial side. But there's reasons for that, because I mean, one of the big things to think about is there's very different goals between the two different communities. Very different goals, right? The goal of a commercial war game designer, is to design some scenario, some whatever, and you're trying to evoke some historical event or whatever it is, and you have to think about winning and all those sorts of things. Well, there's no real winning in a strategic or like a typical professional war game. You're trying to accomplish something, right? It might be, can we get logistics from point A to point B in this environment, or whatever it is. And you might have to reset that scenario over and over and over, and change the variables and that kind of thing. So it would be very hard. I'm not sure how much you'd be able to borrow from that community, other than maybe like a specific technique or something like that, right? But my experience has been more one-sided, one direction.
So coming from designers to the army or whatever.
Or I would just say commercial war games to professional war games in general, right? Not necessarily designers, but the entire, just like Volko was talking about, the idea that you're not beholden to a very stringent set of rules. Like, you have the ability to, okay, we need to achieve this. We need to build a model that can get at it. What's the available games that, can do that? How could we emulate it?
I mean, I approach this question. This is a learning process for me, 100%. Actually, Artie, you would be into this because you do a lot of conventions. So when you guys went to conventions,
I did.
Right. Yeah. So when you guys go to conventions, do you see a divide between people who play, for lack of a better word, Twilight Struggle, and people who do Hex Encounter? Is there a huge divide that you've seen, and has it dissipated as time went on?
It has the barrier between like the old school traditional Hex Encounter wargamers at major multi-game type conventions like Origins, for example, has dissipated over the years. Actually, there used to be dedicated wargaming rooms, more than one. Actually, this is Regina, by the way.
Hey, Regina.
There used to be dedicated wargaming rooms at Origins, for example, and now there isn't. You're just in the boardroom with all the other board gamers. There's tons of what I like to call crossover games in there, games that appeal to wargamers and non-wargamers. Things like your Twilight Struggle and your Combat Commanders and your coins and your commands and colors and things like that. And there's a ton of that stuff getting played down there. And some of it's the oldsters, and some of it's, kids. Some of it's brand new people.
If I can stop you, because I got a thought, and if you talk, my thought's going to go away. So that's crossover games. Crossover. Now, I think as time goes on, the crossover games will be Hex Encounter games, and what's going to be more acceptable is a David Thompson and a Volko Runke type game, man.
I think that's true now, really. I mean, well, I guess maybe let me define what I mean by crossover game. If we are arguing about whether or not it is a war game, then it is probably a crossover, what I would call a crossover game. So, I mean, I think the new style, if you will, that's a super loose term that I haven't given any thought to at all, of war games like your coin games or your Undaunted or what have you, or your Combat Commanders or Commands and Colors, I have become more accepted now than the Hex Encounter stuff. I mean, we're not. I'm totally being Dr. Evil here.
Hi, Kevin.
But all right, she's had enough. But if I had planned that out, it would have been a little better. But you can't win them all. But yeah, I mean, I think those types of games, what I would call crossover games, are already more widely accepted on the convention scene. Now, that Origins is a very different experience than going to, say, the Concept World Expo.
Yeah,
WBC is a weird cat in a lot of ways, and I've never been to WBC or Concept World Expo, but I have been to like Winter Offensive and Compass Expo and Winterfest, all of which they have the same event complexion as Wisconsin World Expo. But WBC's its own thing. I mean, there's a ton of people playing not war games at all there, from my understanding.
Artie, at the Volko and David, you guys have been to Consum World, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Any coin games played at Consum World?
Well, we certainly play tested a lot there. We presented them there. Whether I've not been to the last several ones, so I don't know to what degree they're played. It's not what Consum Expo is intended for,
right?
Which is something that a game that requires a several day sustained commitment to really play and to be
lifestyle
a home
games
for that, right? The old-fashioned monster, war games. So that's what it's intended for, and what's I think the focus tends to be. And I mean, I went there and I played, Next War Korea, pretty traditional grognardy game. That said, there's a lot of other stuff going on too, of course, and that other stuff has at a minimum included play tests and demos and pitches of coin games. I know that for a fact.
So when you walked into Consum World, was there like a sigh of like, oh God?
Whatever
that doesn't happen.
Whatever do you
People
mean?
are
Dan?
thinking
No, because you're the coin guy, so you're going into a Consum World, which is basically hex and counter type.
Yeah, but
here walks Volko Runke with a new idea, and it's like, oh God, does that happen?
No. Well, first of all, I was going there before I was the coin guy. And no, I had lots of takers for trying out Andean Abyss or a Distant Plane there, for example. I'm pretty sure that Harold, pitched Liberty or Death there. So
Who?
Harold Buchanan, HP.
Oh, yeah.
we have heard of him.
Yeah. So okay.
Hey Dan, I want to interrupt you because I want to bring up one thing because when the CSRs came out, obviously the big topic of discussion was U-boat, right?
Yeah.
Rightfully so. Totally understand it. In Undaunted won Board Game Geeks War Game of the Year, right?
Right.
And both of those met the reaction from both of those were, hey, those aren't really war games. These awards should represent. I think one thing we should talk about is the fact that people who are into traditional war game, hex and counter war games, whatever we want to call it, I think it's important that we recognize the fact that it's understandable that they feel like, rightfully so, that there's no award for them, right? Whatever that means, because what I think it's, if you guys understand what I'm saying, right?
Yes.
So when Undaunted won Board Game Geek of the Year, and then the CSRs were announced that, hey, we're going to come back out, I think a lot of people thought, well, cool, now the CSRs are back, so we can have a proper war game award for war gamers. And then U-boat wins the CSR.
On PGG.
Yeah. And so
Well,
one thing I just want to because in Lost in the Shuffle is this whole conversation about whether those are war games or not. But really the unspoken part is there's a community of people that really like traditional games, and I do too, right? Like I like hex and counter games, and it's understandable that community feels a little bit disenfranchised by the fact that these other games are being called war games and taking attention from the games they like.
So now should there be a disclaimer on a game that says traditional hex and counter war game?
Well, I don't know I'm not sure there's a great solution for everybody, right?
We could form a committee and issue stickers. Legit hex and counter war game.
Well, I mean, the point is, because I know you're playing devil's advocate, Dan, but a couple of times it's we've painted people who are traditionalists or whatever you want to call it in this light of not accepting new things. But we should also talk about why.
So David, both of those awards are based on votes, isn't that right? Just players' votes, right?
Yeah.
So it's popularity. Right. Yeah.
It's a popularity contest. Yeah.
So and that's the issue. And so what would be a useful exercise would be to form an award and have it be, and it would be decided by a committee of judges. It would be a judged rather than a voted award, and it would be by pre-specified objective criteria.
Mhm.
So I just, as you know, I've been involved in the design of an award contest, if you will, a game design award contest. And an important part of that is, who's the field that can be considered, and what are the criteria? And it's useful to go through and think about, well, if we want to award, reward, encourage, incentivize, popularize, promote certain characteristics in games, what are those characteristics?
Mhm.
Right? And that would be a useful exercise to have a number of folks who know the hobby well and are very like the traditional war games that are having these conversations about, why isn't this game or that game winning the popularity contests? Form a committee and write and define what those criteria are. Does it have to, does it have to have a map? So forth. Go through whatever those things. What are the values that a judge can then say, okay, on this value, like our three main ones in the Zenobia Award are historicity, originality, and gameplay. Those are the three things we hope to judge. So it would be that sort of thing. To what degree does it focus on military conflict? That could be a criterion.
Yeah.
And you could say, well, this game gets a 10 for that, and this game gets a 2 for that, right? And whatever else that just to form those criteria and have those be out there and say, okay, and now for games that were published in calendar year 2020, there's going to be this award and people can nominate them, but to win, they have to be judged according to these criteria. And then that committee, that judges panel has to defend that, and say, here's why this game won, and it's the best war game of 2020 by these criteria. That would be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And
I
who
would support such an initiative.
Yeah, you sure. I would support that too. Who's going to be the judges?
Well, you could have an entire show on, or entire 3-hour behind the scenes roundtable hashing that exact question out.
Because the judges are going to be involved in the industry, and right there's a conflict of interest.
Potentially.
Well, you can find judges who are not going to have a direct interest in any of the titles, the finalists under consideration. And if there's somebody that has to recuse, then you recuse. But I think there's still a large enough population of war gamers, of knowledgeable, smart people, that you can form a judges panel without conflict of interest. I'd be pretty confident of that.
Really? Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Look, the CSRs, it's tough now because Kevin just said, where was Kevin? Kevin just said something, and he's people are probably going to scream here. He said this, and I don't disagree. I don't disagree, and I don't think it was wrong either. Presented.
I didn't follow closely. I mean, I vaguely know. So first of all, I know Jaro, right, at Phalanx, right? He's a nice guy. I've had nothing but good interactions with Phalanx. I have a game with Europe Divided was published by Phalanx, right? So you're totally, full disclosure. But what if it's just the publisher? That's literally the publisher's job, right? So if it's Phalanx telling people, hey, go vote for my game, I want my publisher to do that. If I had a game that was up for it, right, I would want them to. What are they not? That's their job. That's literally their job.
Okay, well, going back to the Grognard thing and going against the grain, that went against the grain, and look how much, for lack of a better word, shit that received.
Well, I mean, there's I don't know that we did have an entire 2-hour or so podcast about this.
It's a lot of free publicity for U-Boat.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, my issue isn't so much that U-Boat won an award, right? And I don't think it's a war game, right? I think my problems are with the structural issues of the way that worked out, where like, how does a game win best map graphics if it doesn't have a map? How does this game win a 2019 award when it was released in 2006? I don't have answers to those questions. And those were my more serious concerns, other than just being a complainer, as I want to do. Well,
I mean, I can answer those questions, having been close to that committee. Is that it's the first time it's back. It was trust me, it was an immense undertaking. It's insane
I have no doubt, and you've done the Lord's work, Dan, by helping to make it happen.
I'm not even talking about my side of the thing, because if I would, you guys would cry. But what I'm trying to say is that it was, and I'm not excusing anything, and I applaud Tin Tao for doing this, because man, he's eaten a lot of crap. But that's okay. That's to be expected. And I even forgot what the hell I was trying to say. Oh, U-boat. Yeah. Jesus, Artie, I forgot what I was going to say. You're on here. You're supposed to help me out. Anyways, okay, U-boat not being a war game. What's the matter with you? It's a war game. People shoot and people die.
You want to? It's a worker placement game. I mean, that's the thing to me. It's a thinly themed worker placement game, which in no way means that it is a bad game or that I am saying it is a bad game. I haven't actually played it. I am told it's a lot of fun, and I am completely prepared to believe that. It looks cool, but it's not the kind of thing it's not in that, that warm embrace of my comfort zone that I talked about before. And that's why I don't think it's a war game. And like I said, I would have had zero issue and zero even pedantic issue had, say, Undaunted won the award instead. I do consider that a war game because it is. I think it is. But again, that's a decision that every individual in the hobby is making for themselves, and we don't really have. There's no board that certifies your wargaminess of your war game.
Look, Volko, I don't know if I'm wrong in saying this, because I don't know much the coin system. As a matter of fact, I don't know it at all. But the coin system, it's more of a political struggle, isn't it?
I'll let Volko answer that, but I would disagree with that statement.
Isn't it more of a political? Isn't it more politic involved type game?
Then what?
Exactly. Is it more politics than Wacht dem Rhein? Yes, it totally is. But it depends on the coin game too. I mean, it is a mistake to overgeneralize about the coins series, I think, because a game like Pendragon, which is maybe my favorite coin game, is a quite different game than, say, Fire in the Lake, which is a quite different game than, say, Liberty or Death. They have the same structures. They're built on the same skeletons, but they're very different games. I would say that other than through the card events, like Liberty or Death is not particularly political. It's more political than Wacht dem Rhein or Case Blue, but
if you compare Liberty or Death to other games about the American Revolution, let's compare, for example, Liberty or Death to Supply Lines, the American Revolution. Okay, all right, because they both have cubes, and they're and neither has hexes, right? And then they're both about the American Revolution, the Revolutionary War, if you like. So they are about a war. In Liberty or Death, you are concerned principally with positioning your forces and undertaking actions in such a way to keep the popular will on your side. That's political. You're using military tools, but the central objective is political. It's treating the war, it's focusing on the aspect of the war that is insurrection, that is revolutionary, if you like. Supply lines, there's units moving around and you're recruiting them and you're trying to take objectives and occupy areas, but you're principally focused on trying to keep your troops armed and fed. So it just takes a different, all that was going on in the American Revolution. So one is more military logistical, Supply Lines, American Revolution, and one is more Paul Mill, if you like. And then on top of that, Liberty or Death can be played with 4 people in different, and of those 4 players, those 4 factions, only one ends up on top. And so you have, frictions within alliances, and you have diplomacy that can go on even across the opposite sides of the alliance. And so now you've got diplomacy in there, which in the 2-player Supply Lines of the American Revolution is completely absent. So there are different focuses of each, And yes, in that, if you make that comparison, Liberty or Death is more political than Supply Lines: The American Revolution.
Artie, I'm going to ask you a question, okay? Does a coin game need a map?
It would be difficult for me to envision a coin game without a map, but I'm reluctant to say that that is an absolute necessity. You could, in theory, do a entirely card-based game with similar mechanics. Maybe you would build a map out of the cards, or maybe you would just have a hand of cards, and that represents the game space. I mean, I could envision something like that. So I would say no. I wouldn't necessarily say that.
What do you say, Volko?
Does it have to have a map?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to. I mean, there aren't any rules on what it has to have, I guess. But, again, I go back to, I use a map because it's something that gets me somewhere. It's a tool that helps me transport you to that setting. So if there were a setting, I guess, that you would undertake with a coin system, an internal war of some kind or an interfactional struggle of some kind, in which the features across which, the geography across which is occurring, are irrelevant, or it's just in cyberspace, let's say,
so
right, something like that, then perhaps you wouldn't need that tool. I mean, it'd be an adornment that would not do any lifting for you in terms of transporting people to that setting.
Because there is a coin game coming out in space, and I'm wondering how that's going to work.
Well, on Mars.
It's happening on Mars. Okay, I thought it was happening in space.
Well, Mars is in space, so
yeah. So it's on Mars. It's in human settlements, 200-year-old human settlements on Mars. So you've got a portion of Mars that you're looking at. I think that Phobos is also plays a role in terms of shuttling in from Earth. So Earth is like an off-map resource of troops, and they come in via. So there's a little bit of stuff maybe going on in orbit around Mars, but the focus of attention is these human settlements, these tunneled city complexes on the planet.
I just can I, Dan, real quick? Can I just jump in on this issue of a map? So I think there's been no wars in human history that geography didn't play a significant role to date, right?
Right.
But Volko hit on something that's changing now, right? So there have been conflicts in cyberspace, right? And you can imagine in the future there will be entire conflicts that either happen in cyberspace or in space, right? So just to answer your original question, I think that geography has to play a role in most wars, if not all wars, whether it takes place on a map or not. If you choose to make it not a map, then you're taking on an abstraction where you're going to have to map that to something else, right? Probably. But I think we're going to have to get ourselves out of this mentality. And this is coming from a guy who my entire life is geospatial, right? Where that's not necessarily going to be the future. Or at least there will be elements that won't be.
That's going to be a real breakthrough that I haven't seen yet for real life. There are and there's Netrunner and that kind of thing. But for real life, a game, and I go back to my main expectation when I play a war game. Okay, just similar to yours, David, is what am I learning from this? Right. I want to go somewhere. I want to do time travel. I want to do some tourism through history. And I want to learn something about this destination I'm visiting, right? That's the main reason I'm there. And so that's what I ask myself when I played a game the way that I like. It's like, what did I learn from this? So if we could have a tabletop game that was a conflict in cyberspace, a cyber-based conflict that I could really learn from about real life cyber conflict. I mean, I don't think there is one yet. If there is, but when there is, and when somebody comes up with a way to visualize that, because cyber is very difficult for us to think about because it's not easily visualized as something. I can visualize Europe. I can visualize Colombia and the Andes, right? And the map in the game helps me do that. That's why it helps to transfer. But now you have to invent some way to help somebody like me who doesn't know cyber warfare see and better understand what's happening, what the dynamics are playing out on the table through visuals. And somebody's going to come up with that. That's going to be great.
David, are you a cyber warfare type of guy?
Well, we're all becoming more and more cyber warfare kind of guys every day, honestly, in our career. But I mean, no, historically, that's not been my, career of expertise, right, or field of expertise. But seriously, it's becoming more and more like that. We all will have to integrate that into our work. Yeah, and what Volko is saying is exactly right. Like we all think spatially, right? There's a spatial element to everything we think of. So when you talk about visualization of conflict without a spatial element, like that's a very challenging thing for humans to wrap their mind around.
You guys, and I'm going to go back again to you guys. You're basically the Sex Pistols of rock and roll, right? You guys came around.
No.
Wait,
These gentlemen have talent, unlike the Sex Pistols, man.
That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying the Sex Pistols came around and changed the way we listen to music today and the way it's done. Can you agree or disagree with that? No, you can agree with that. Yes, you can't disagree with that. Anyways, it's my show, Artie. Shut up. What was I saying? Yeah. So you guys are like the Sex Pistols for me. This is just for me of the war game. You came around. You kind of shook the cage of the old guys, the classical guys. Okay. And God, why do I forget my train of thought? Artie, you see what you did to me, man?
I am not responsible for that particular train.
What was I gonna say? So the Sex Pistols, yeah. Oh, for God's sake!
I am not the conductor of your soul train, Dan.
Let me react to that a little bit in terms of shaking up. And it's not. This is what I was going back to the flow. Yes, I'm willing to say I went against the grain. I cut against the grain, right? Okay, but I'm also flowing down the same river we all are. So how's that possible?
Yeah, but now you're being a philosopher. Now you're being.
Well, we're stepping back and we're going to try to understand our culture and our hobby and what happened. I mean, there's no other way to answer that. Are we the Sex Pistols, right?
Of course.
The fact is that is all human innovation. All human innovation is taking two different things, putting together in some new way to some new purpose, right? Those things that fuse to make the new thing, those old things, they're always old things, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Nothing came from nowhere.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And there's always new things that are shaking up the old traditional guys, right? So it used to be Charles S. Roberts was shaking up what games are, right? If it's 1960, that's what's happening. He's going against the grain and he's shaking it up. And
he's creating the grain, Volko.
Okay, is he?
Well, I mean, he's creating the grain in a new era. He's
all right, fine. That's what we're all doing, right? So now the grain is something else. Like now, the other games are popular than were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But Charles Roberts took things from. By the way, I think professional wargaming, I just strongly suspect places like RAND informed what a game about war should look like, right? And what board games were, and what diplomacy was, and what H.G. Wells and miniatures had done, and all of that, right? He's not coming from nowhere.
That's right.
There were old traditional guys, in effect, and he was doing something. Okay, and so same with Dunnigan, same with Upfront. John Hill with Squad Leader. Squad Leader. Do you know how much against the grain Squad Leader was?
Yes.
Were you guys playing it when it first came out?
No. I came to it many years after that.
It was really iconoclastic because the approach before that had been the scientific one. Tobruk. Ever play the game Tobruk?
No, actually.
Okay. Why have you never heard of Tobruk? It's tank and infantry tactical battles in North Africa. It was out just before, but it was very sort of statistical, science based, and you rolled and you had to like hit the turret ring to bust the PZ3 or whatever. And it ended up being boring. What John Hill did, he said, look, we have to look at the human element here. Morale. Units are not just in real life, squads are not just these little robots you can push around all day long. They are people who are scared and don't want to be there and want to go home. And we're going to put that in the game.
So wait, Vogel. So that there was no morale before that?
So miniatures had it. But see if you can find it in Hex Encounter war games before Squad Leader.
I can think of no examples.
So that was like, whoa. So you mean when these guys break, they just sit there and I can't move them anymore? Really? That's weird. And there's a lot of other aspects to Squad Leader that was more sort of considered, art than science. Things were abstracted in ways that were jarring for the time. But it rocketed until Brooke died. And now, of course, ASL, that's like the traditional, the grain. But
think about what that did. I mean, with other games that took that started asking that same question of how do we reflect command and control elements in this design? And we have now this isn't new now. We had a huge flowering of games that did exactly that through various means, through, Mark Herman's Pacific War, for example, which has its operations points or whatever they're called. The Great Campaigns of the American Civil War, which has an elaborate activation system. Any game really with an activation system. OCS with its micromanagement of supply points through chits on the map. I mean, these are all descendants of games that answered that same question of, okay, so this is a cool idea. We've never seen this in games before.
And they're all innovations. They're all innovations, meaning they took something, they adopted a new purpose, they twisted things around here. Maybe they borrowed something from miniatures or from other simulations and came up with something new that takes the state of the art forward and broadens it and broadens the toolbox and gives us more possibilities. And that's going on continuously. We just, if you happen to drop in the hobby at a certain time, just like David was saying, look, what was the first, war game that he played? That's going to influence his expectations. So that's natural. But it's not like there's like tradition. It's going on in stasis and suddenly the Sex Pistols arrive and everything's different. No.
I was just about to say, Volko, you're amazing till you just said that. But anyway.
I'm sure that's true in music too. Isn't that true in music?
You mean, no, when the Sex Pistols came, that was a kick in the balls.
A lot of things.
Maybe, but they were
kicks in the balls all the time. That's what I'm saying. There are repeated kicks in the ball.
This guy had big feet, man.
Bigger than the Beatles.
No.
I mean, they're Sex Pistols. To take your examples, punk rock was reacting to something. They were coming up with a different answer to the questions that the previous environment had been asking.
Thank you.
So I mean, in a sense, they're a product of their time. Every design is a product of its time. I mean, even things that seem to have just appeared out of thin air, like role-playing games, for example, it's more complicated than that. There were these elaborate miniatures games with strong role-playing elements that had existed for some years prior to Gary Gygax and Dave Arnson writing out the Three Little Books.
Yeah.
So
Dungeons and Dragons came from somewhere.
Yes.
That's always true.
Now, David, Jesus, Artie, you said something that reacting. Now, Dave, your games really, really look like, and I'm just speaking out here. It looks like you're reacting. It's like you're taking Hex Encounter and you're saying, "Hey, I'm gonna put tiles," and hey, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to make a submarine game about an obscure torpedo, like from Italy, like, and you know what? They actually were a major influence in a lot of stuff. These guys, like, they really dealt with English shit. But,
absolutely, yeah.
But
they sank at least one battleship.
Two battleships and one attack. Yeah, that's right.
That's incredible. But anyways, going back to Stealth and Sea, by the way, I just love the cover. The whole thing is just fantastic. That is reacting if you think about it, right? I don't see.
No, because, well, I mean, maybe, but okay, go ahead.
I don't see you doing Hex Encounter, man.
Well, I mean, by Stealth and Sea is Hex Encounter. We talked about that, right? So here's the thing, though. You got to remember, what I said earlier was true. So when I started designing Undaunted, 2013 or so, I had never played a war game.
That's
Ever.
the problem.
I had never played a war game. So by the idea that you're reacting to something means that you have to have a foundation to react to, right? You have to be you have to know what it is you're reacting to. I had never played what anyone here would call a war game at all. Period. Like Risk, maybe, or Axis and Allies or something, right? That was it. So it's not reacting. And now, of course, now as I've gone on and played proper war games, I would have incorporated concepts into my ideas, right? But I remember 2015 or something like that. My neighbor invites me over and we're playing Normandy 44, and he's like, "Yeah, Zoc, da 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 da." I was like, "I don't know what words you're talking about. That doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know what that means." I didn't know what a Zoc was, right? Hey, what's a Zoc? I didn't know what that was, and that was 2 years after I had started working on Undaunted. So you can't react to something if you don't know about it. I would submit.
Basically, you're like the Immaculate Conception, unlike Volko, where he was doing hex and counter war games. And basically, you can say, Volko, are you reacting now? Because Volko, I don't see you doing a hex and counter war game. So are you reacting now?
Well, I've done scenarios for hex and counter war games, but it's a different. You're right. I'm coming from a different place. It is a different experience, and I am reacting because, I mean, David, I think you're reacting to something when you were designing that. I can't imagine you went to designing games without having played games of some kind.
Right? So, life.
You know, you're reacting to something.
Yeah.
And you're saying, well, I see a different setting and a different representation or simulation that I'm going to do, and you're reaching into a toolkit that you have in part seen elsewhere.
Yeah.
Unless you're some amazing superhuman creature.
This full disclosure. So I mean, the DNA I think is fairly clear. Like I had played A Few Acres of Snow. I had started playing deck building games. And I had started playing games like A Few Acres of Snow, right? And so if you think about the two, they're both deck building games. They have a spatial element to it. They have command, all of the things that you can use deck building as a mechanism to model fog of war, those kinds of things. So it was 100% a direct influence from that.
Yeah. So is that, Dan, what you mean by reacting to, or am I?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in that regard, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and it's the same way. I'm looking at my history and what I know, and I have a setting or something. My first published game was Wilderness War, and I just was really into the French Indian War, and I played all the games on the French Indian War. But I thought, having done a research on it and a paper campaign, that there's no game that does everything I want to have it do for that war.
There never will be.
And I'd had that experience I described with Simonich's Hannibal, Rome versus Carthage. And I thought, well, what if I took that and I set it in the French and Indian War? That's Wilderness War. So I am reacting. And it was my first design, so I didn't stray very far, But when it got up to doing a game on Columbia, I'm reacting to CDGs, which I had designed in. Not only played a lot, but I'd now designed, Wilderness War and Labyrinth. And I thought, there's a way to leverage this ops menu plus event trade-off that doesn't have so much focus on hand management, so that I bring the eyes back to the map. It's kind of what I wanted to do, not thinking so much about, which didn't seem to me to have too much to do with warfare, this hand management aspect. It's fun, but I wanted to get away from that a little bit. And so that's where the initiative cards and event cards and how they work in the coin series, that's where that came from. So I was reacting in a sense of, okay, I have this toolbox from stuff I've played and designed before, but I want to try something a little different. So I'm going to, just turn this a little way and take something new from over here, combine it.
Because Volko, David, It's going to start with Mark Herman, the new book that's going to come out, Wargaming, this and this and that, and in the 21st century, when the book's going to come out, being printed in the 21st century, I mean, that you guys are going to be the catalyst written in there that made war games. Well, there was a Y in the road, and when you come to a Y in the road, take it type thing. So you guys will be known as the beginning of, what's a good word for that? The beginning of the change of war games, man. Traditional hex and counter war games.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah, Volko.
I mean, there's been an evolution the whole time, though. I mean, we're
not going to go through the evolution of a germ to a paramecium to a. I mean, they're going to say Jim Dunnigan, Mark Simonich, and then bloody hell, Mark Herman comes around and draws a card, and bloody hell, here comes Volko Ruhnke, and it's like, it's intelligence, and bloody hell, here's a guy, David Thompson, who's propagating this to the crowd. Bloody hell! Obviously, you guys you're gonna be written in the books, and you're gonna be a major influence. Yes.
But that's what you just described. It coheres, doesn't it? It makes sense, and it's not you're going down one road and then there's a Y.
No,
right? It's the whole time, right?
Well, it's funny that you said that. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think we were going down a straight and narrow till well, Volko.
I mean, look at Mark Herman and the card-driven game, and there's certainly a model of card-driven games that Mark popularized, certainly. But there were war games before that with cards in it. I mean, I can name at least half a dozen examples from SPI.
I did a whole lecture on that for Georgetown University War Game Society. Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. You can see it.
Yeah, now that doesn't mean that Mark didn't innovate there, or that Mark's innovations there have not been enormously influential. But it's a chain of events. I mean, we're kind of talking about the great man theory of history versus the mob, right? The flow of history and the events of history are inevitable. And I suspect, as somebody who has studied history, that the truth is somewhere in between, and that we have notable individuals that affect the flow, but the flow is flowing regardless of what any given individual happens to do. So I think we would have ended up, I mean, I will agree with the statement that if someone in 50 years is writing a history of war games at this time, that both Volko and David will be important chapters in that book. But at the same time, I suspect that we would have arrived in similar places regardless of who was involved. We have remember that wargaming doesn't exist in a vacuum either, right? We are embedded now in this larger tabletop gaming hobby of what now gets called analog gaming, to differentiate it in probably the most important way you could differentiate it, which is from computer games. And within that there's board gaming, and within that there's war gaming and a bunch of other little gamings. So we don't exist in a vacuum, right? Are any of the events that we have talked about, any of the innovations we've talked about, more important to wargaming than the general surge in analog gaming over the last 5 years or so, or 10 years? I'm not sure that that's the case. And those social events are carrying wargaming along with it, whether it wants to kick and scream on the trip or not.
And a part of that too is, if there are, whatever great men in history, they might make a difference in terms of exactly how and when and with the details. But presumably, if they're successful, they're doing things for reasons, right? For logical reasons. And if it wasn't them, then sooner or later somebody else would do something for that same reason. So when Mark Herman brought in cards forcefully in We the People in the early 90s, and one of your viewers, Timon, just said mentioned up front, right, which used cards in even in highly innovative ways, almost 15 years before. So when he did that, there's a reason that why that stuck, why cards that bring non-military events into a military simulation is powerful for gameplay and for simulation. This is what I talk about in my lecture. There are reasons for that are natural, that are unavoidable. And if Mark hadn't done that, I mean, not to denigrate what he achieved in coming up with what we now know as CDGs, but if he hadn't, most likely somebody else would have. And some of the greatest power of that system was amplified by Mark Simonich taking what Mark Herman had done and just doing a little twist to it, which was that a single card would be usable either as ops or the event, right? And that just brought it even further forward. So what David is doing today and what I've been doing, hopefully has a sense to it. There's a logic to it as we react to the larger stream of board games and the possibilities. And for the coin series, it's, a part of it is a lot of wargaming by tradition was focused on big conventional wars rather than internal wars, even though internal wars, insurgencies and the like, are much, much, much more common wars in history. That isn't about me. That's in history. That's simply a fact. And it was just an unmined area that I followed others. Brian Train had already gone there. I followed others. There's no reason, that wouldn't have happened anyway without me.
Yeah, well, I mean, it happened with you. Now
it did happen with me, as it happened, by happenstance. It did happen with me. That's all.
Yeah, and David. I guess it happened with David too, unbeknownst to him, what his influences were. You guys have radically changed the face of war game. And personally, for me, I think that's fantastic. I think you guys have brought it. You've opened it up like, hey, little Johnny, check this game out. You can play these soldiers and the sniper game that I'm not supposed to talk about that David's doing. You're supposed to go behind this. And I mean, that's just fantastic. And again, I really appreciate you guys, your thoughts on this, because we could go on for hours. And actually, we overstepped my limits of an hour to an hour and a half because, man, this is such a great conversation. I have so many questions that I can't even remember. Yeah. And all I want to say is that Twilight Struggle is a war game, and U-Boot is a war game. Artie, get with it. Stop it.
I disagree and am personally offended.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, anyways, look, I'm going to cut this show. David, thank you so much. Volko, thank you so much. Artie, thank you so much. I thought you were going to be on my side.
I am always on your side, Dan. I'm always on your side.
And that's why I brought you in. But I'll call you, don't call me type.
You're not even wearing that awful Michigan shirt right now. I don't even have a reason to make fun of you.
You know what I'm going to do, and I keep thinking about it 100%, and I promise you I'm going to do it.
Does the University of Michigan send Michigan shirts to random people in Canada? Is that why you have that shirt?
I bought
some rando in Canada.
Yes.
I bought that T-shirt for $3 in Nova Scotia.
Oh, that makes sense. So it did come with a bowl of soup then.
If my girlfriend was here, anyways.
I gotta punish you for Michigan. I
don't even know what's wrong with Michigan. What the hell?
I live in Columbus, Ohio.
Dan, so we lived in Dayton. So I'm in Dayton, Ohio, right?
David will understand. He explain it to you.
I maybe 4 or 5 months. Okay, the kids go to school. My kids are in elementary school. Okay. And one of them comes home and they're just in the room talking together. And one of them happens to say the word Michigan. And the other replies, "Oh, we don't say that word." And they don't even know why they're saying it. They're like very serious. It's a bad word.
We never say the name of the Scottish play.
That's unbelievable. Look,
that's fantastic.
In hockey, Montreal and Quebec are 3.5 hours away. And when hockey was hockey, the Habs used to play against a team in Quebec called the Nordiques. And we hated the Nordiques, but we loved them because they gave us the hate, right?
Yeah.
Every time they would play together, it would be like, kill them! them. And is that what Michigan is?
We love Michigan because we beat their pants off every year now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
So
This
guys,
is an American football, mostly football thing.
oh yeah, that's what I was gonna say before Artie, you so rudely interrupted me. We were talking about the Michigan T-shirt. I only have one Michigan T-shirt, and it's becoming ratty. And I love it because, you know, the smell of me never really goes away with how many washes I do. So it's just
okay.
nice. And
Dan, it's okay. We have instructed Alexander from the Players Aid to send you a variety of fine apparel.
anyways, when that T-shirt becomes totally destroyed, I'm going to make a plaque with the Michigan. I'm going to cut it out, and I'm going to make a plaque, and a serious plaque. And I'm going to say, thank you very much, Harold Buchanan. You fueled me for so many years. I mean, this Michigan thing, where is
I'm forced
Michigan?
to admit that, yes, you should frame it and send it to
Absolutely.
Harold. That would be hilarious.
Okay, guys, I could go on. Thank you very much. I'm going to end the show here. Artie, thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, anytime.
David, I was going to ask you what's coming up next in your head, but I know you're not going to tell me. Volko, I know you're going to tell me, but we don't have enough time. And and I was just I'm being devil's advocate here. I just wanted a subject. It was Sunday night. This is great. I really appreciate it. Love you guys very much. Stick around. I'm going to play my professional outro, that the music I wrote, and I edited everything. And look at this. Look at this.
Oh.
Gee, I wonder who HB
I don't
could
know, but
possibly be.
he must be a friend of Harold Buchanan.
That's possible.
Anyways,
Could be.
guys, stick around, please. I'm going to play the outro. Again, I really appreciate this.
Thanks for the conversation.
I can't say how much I appreciate this.
Thanks for inviting me.
And we'll think about that next time. And here we go with the outro.